Hello and welcome to Just Onside. It's Friday. I'm happy the week's over. So I'm going to enjoy the weekend. But before we enjoy the weekend, we'll do the show. So, Ois, how are you? And how's your week been?
It's been a good week, a long week. Actually, a short week. Why am I lying? We had the slightly short week after the public holidays, but still felt like Wednesday, Thursday, Friday made up for that. But yeah, happy to have another weekend with us. Some good games, big games, Premier League games coming thick and fast. You, no doubt, you'll have your eye on one level lower. Who are you playing this weekend? Tell us.
We're playing Derby tomorrow at 12:30. So it's a must win after last week, the horror show of last week. So we have to get the points. And it's a non-negotiable. We've got to win. I don't care how we win. I used to always be critical about performance, but sod the performance. We just need 3 points. Burnley play today, so I'm hoping that Middlesbrough do us a favour. So if they can get a point or something out of the game, that'll do us a favour because it's getting a little bit tight at the top, and I can see us dropping many, many points. So we need all the help we can get.
Yeah, look, I think you're still well positioned, but I'm with you. Like after a defeat, you just want to bounce back with a win, regardless of the performance, just to get those feel good factor going again. You were on a good run just before then, to be fair, so maybe you were due a bad result, but long way to go in the season yet. Long way to go.
You say we were on a good run. We've not had 3 wins on the bounce for a long, long time. So we may not have got beaten, but we've not had that run that we need. In the championship, you need a run. If you really want to cement a place in the top two, you need a run. I mean, in saying that, we had a really good run last year where we went to about 13, 14 games. We won 12, but in the end, we didn't make it. So it just shows that in this league, if you're just winning 2 games and then not winning, it's not ideal. But we are where we are. Let's see what happens tomorrow. Tomorrow is another day. Right, let's talk about Premier League. But we're going to start off with, well, we were going to have our uh, regular Spud guest, Moggy, but he has to catch a bus. He travels from Blackburn to Preston, so but he hopefully should join us on Monday next week. I've got a feeling that they'll get beat again, so he'll not be in a good mood at all. So, Spuds, it's been a funny all season. They've had 2 massive wins against Man City. They had a really good win in the league, 4-0. But it's been so indifferent. And they're the only side, I think, that have been beaten by Ipswich as well, amongst other losses that they've had. So uh, he's been quite tetchy as well. The Ange. I sort of didn't watch the his press conference, but I read the transcript, and he's quite tetchy. He's sort of feeling the heat. Some of the fans are giving him some abuse, rightly so, and he's not liking it. So what's gone wrong at Spuds?
It's bizarre, isn't it? I mean, you're right. They've mixed some really poor results in amongst some incredible highs this season. Obviously, with the result of the season, that spanking that they handed out to Man City at the Etihad just a couple of weeks ago. I remember watching the game against Man City, and I think text you mentioned Moggy, and I texted him during the game saying this must be your best feeling as a Spurs fan since, and I put it as a question mark to him. And he responded literally within seconds saying the Lucas Moura hat trick against Ajax. So it was there. I mean, that was an incredible night, if you remember, you against Ajax to take them through to their maiden Champions League final. But the euphoria of the night. So I understood. I was pretty confident that was the right answer. But in amongst that, you often felt you thought at the time after the dust had settled, and the story was Man City to some extent that night. But when the dust settled, you did think it'll be interesting just to see how Spurs fare and how they kick on because a performance like that leaves you thinking, "Ooh, this team, if they get their act together, could if it wasn't for Liverpool's great run at the top, could get themselves in the mixer." There was a lot to like about that performance. A clean sheet at the Etihad, which is a very difficult place to go and get a clean sheet, even now during what has been a difficult run for Man City. But the jury was out, wasn't it, in terms of Spurs' ability to not necessarily beat the lesser teams, but just to find that mentality to be consistent. You'll remember just before then against Palace, they dropped points by, again, a lack of focus and concentration early doors. And then they went to play Fulham, obviously, thereafter. It was home game against Fulham. You're thinking, right, consolidate the game against Man City. beat Fulham at home, and Fulham were much the better team. And admitted there afterwards as well that we were pretty much. I think the point was the fair result. Uh, Tottenham with Brennan Johnson actually scored when Fulham were having their best period of the game, so he did come against the run of play, and Fulham rightly through Tom Kenny, I thought got a goal and got a result. But you've really got to ask yourself in terms of Spurs when that result happened. I text Moggy again. I said, "Man, this is so typical. You think you build on a result, but fine. I mean, Fulham are one of those teams right now this season, getting some good results, getting the odd shaky result, that home defeat against Wolves. But you thought against yesterday against Bournemouth, you're thinking compete, and again they were second best. There, you Bournemouth, who are a very good team now. I think it's fair to say we spoke highly of the coach and the job that he's done there. But just to lose in the fashion that they lost to you, I think that was the key thing. And this is the accusation that's leveled at Spurs. What they are missing, in my opinion, is that elite mentality in the squad, the characters that you need to say, right, every game starts from nil-nil. We have to earn the right to win the game. See, against City, to some extent, the pressure was off of you. The pressure was on Man City. And I do believe that Spurs are probably at their best when they can use the other team's attacking intents against them, if you know what I mean. Against at Old Trafford, United came out like a house on fire running around after everything, and Spurs just picked them off beautifully in that first half. A game should have been done and dusted in the first half, you'll remember. So similar against Man City, they rode the storm early on, but then they really got into the game and used a lot of the gaps that opened up against them. And again, Spurs were brilliant that day. It feels when they then have to then turn it on and produce a 95-minute dominant performance against teams that are perhaps going to have a not a low block per se, but a team that you think you're going to have to work hard just to break them down. They're not going to just open up for you. They're not going to go for you like a City would, like a Man United would. Those are the teams it seems that they have a little bit of a problem with. You saw it against Ipswich as well. You alluded to it. So the challenge for Spurs is how can you develop that kind of consistency in your game and through elite characters, the mentality monsters that you need in the squad to focus each and every game to earn the right to win a game. Ayub. And right now they're not doing that. They're not turning up consistently, and that tells me that's a slight. I don't mean this as an accusation per se, but there is a weakness there in terms of the mentality that you need because this season's long and hard. You've got every game's difficult. It has its own challenges. You don't get any extra points for beating City 4-0. You get 3 points and I guess a big boost to your goal difference. But you've got to earn the right to win games, and that means being strong defensively. Look at Arsenal the other day. We'll come on to it the other day. They didn't play great, but said, look, we're going to defend solid and we'll see what we can take at the other end. And clearly they did off the two set pieces. So it's that mentality that they need to build. And also, again, a consistent way of playing where when they play against the so-called lesser teams, they can just break them down methodically. Something that they're struggling with, it would appear, for the most part this season. That's the issue that Ange needs to crack. Yes, he's had this thing leveled at him about the goals that they concede from set pieces. That's something that hasn't quite necessarily gone away as well. But yeah, a lot of questions to answer, some heated debate at the end. I thought he dealt with the press conference, to be fair, you fairly well. I think he does speak well. Maybe it's that Australian twang and the way he says mates, but I think generally speaking, he comes across okay. I think he dealt with the furore quite well. But you're right. I mean, poor results brings scrutiny, brings pressure. He justified some of the signings that they've made, confirming that he's fully on board with them, that they will reap dividends in the long run. But if you're a Spurs fan, you must be really disappointed. You win, which is before the season starts, the toughest game on your calendar, an away game at Man City at the Etihad against the champions, winning back to back to back leagues. Uh, and yet you win them and win convincingly. You're thinking, right, guys, if that's not going to convince you that we can beat the teams in this league, nothing will. But yet they've had so many shaky results, and that tells me that something from an intangibles perspective, Ayub, is still missing within that squad. That's something that they're going to have to find if they want to compete at the highest level. Currently, the 10th Ayub, I think 15 points adrift. I mean, even if Liverpool weren't having the great season that they are, they'd still be 12, 11 points adrift of whoever would be leading at this stage. So it's not acceptable if you're a Spurs fan, and they'll be hoping to turn this around and quick. Otherwise, you feel the natives might get a little restless, as they started to show yesterday.
It's a strange club, Spurs. I mean, I've got a couple of friends who are Spurs fans. One Moggy, and there's another friend of mine who's a diehard Spurs fan, but he's very pained. It's a club that you'd expect there to be a lot more success because it's a whether you like Levy or not, he's a wonderful businessman, and what he's done to Tottenham Hotspurs as a business is incredible. I think it is. It on match days. I think it's in the top five in terms of revenue uh, that it accrues on match days. So, and the stadium's state of the art. It's a wonderful stadium. I've never had the pleasure or to go there, but people that have said it's incredible. So, certainly David Levy, from a business point of view, he's done a fantastic job. But it's a club that, I mean, I'm not sure what they've won over the last 30 years, 30 plus years, but it's a club that maybe perhaps they should be challenging every few years for the league, or maybe at least be top four. But they should be winning trophies. It's a club that you'd expect every few years they'd win the FA Cup, League Cup. They should be a club that has the infrastructure to be successful. But for some reason, it's a club that continuously underachieves. Recruit the one conversation I do have with the Spurs fan is that they are questioning the recruitment. I mean, this year, you alluded to Ange defending some of the transfers that they've made, but I mean, with the kid that they signed from us, Archie Gray, wonderful talent, but it was never a right move for Spurs. It was never a right move. I mean, he, you don't spend 40 million on somebody who's not ready. I'm not sure how much game time he's had this season, but he's hardly had any game time. So I can't see the logic or the rationale behind that. They are a club that seriously should be looking at, right, okay, top four should be our aim, our objective. We may not get there, but at least that should be our objective. But certainly winning a trophy, at least one trophy, is something that they should be serious about because these fans are starved of success. As I said, it's a club that if you look at it from the outside, it's everything is in place for success. But for some reason, this club is just year on year failing to deliver. So I'm not sure. Was Ange the right man? I mean, I think you were, if memory serves, uh, glowing testimonials. You thought he'd be a real success. I had my reservations. Uh, in part, I mean, it's quite an easy uh, reason to think of, but I just thought that managing in Scotland, it doesn't give you, I think, the experience that's needed. But in saying that, perhaps other managers have come from lesser leagues and done all right. But I just certainly thought that he was not the right man. I think if Spurs want to get to the next level, I didn't think Ange was the right man. What do you think about Ange? Do you think he is the right man?
I actually do. I mean, look, not all the managers are going to succeed in this league. Simply put, there's, as you say, too few pots and too many good teams, to be honest with you. So you are going to go a long time. And Arsenal were incredible over the last two seasons, and yet have come up short in terms of their overall goal, which was to land a Premier League title. I like him. There are some tweaks he's going to have to consider. Look, they have had some injuries recently, not least in the centre back position. I do think he's going to have to make some changes in personnel over time to address this mentality point. If I said to you, okay, in terms of captain, they've got Heung-min Son, I think, who is the captain. I could be wrong. Happy to
Mm.
be corrected.
Yeah, it is.
Similar player and caliber of player or type of player, let's say like an Odegaard, but Odegaard definitely feels as though he's got a little bit more steeliness, let's say, in him. Not saying Son doesn't. I think he's one of the more incredible players that we've had, especially foreign players in the Premier League, in Premier League history, in my opinion. But it feels that team needs one or two. I was going to say scoundrels, but you get the point, don't you? Just
Mm.
a couple of
Yeah.
players that are superb, but just mature in terms of where the opposition are going to be like, okay, it's going to be a tough game. And I don't think Spurs have anybody where you think, oh, they're a wonderful team to watch. They play some real good stuff on the front foot. But that's my worry. They have a lot of players who play on the front foot. And I don't think they're necessarily the easiest or the hardest, I should say, to create chances against. You think about both their fullbacks, Ayub, Porro and Udogi, they try and fly forward. Again, great when it all pans out. And unless you're going to have, let's say, a double pivot or a central midfield base that's going to protect those two defenders, there are going to be times when you're going to get caught up the pitch and you're going to get caught on the counter. They're still a relatively easy team to play against. Now, when they get back in numbers and they play in a certain shape, they're still difficult. Look, City couldn't score against them and didn't look like scoring actually in that second half for the most part. But again, there's two things he's going to have to address. I do like him because I think A, he speaks well. I think that's always important. B, I do think he gets it. I really do. However, I think the issues with the set pieces is something he's going to have to over time address, whether that's through personnel or whether that's through just simply creating certain tactical elements within defending those set pieces that he's going to have to get better at. And secondly, I think over time they've gone for the youth angle, haven't they, Ayub, in terms of the
Mm.
incomings that they've got. You're right. Not many of those are actually contributing right now, especially Archie Gray. Not to his fault, but it's like you said, if the clock for Spurs is now, in terms of winning stuff now and or challenging now, it does seem, to your point, unusual set of signings because that suggests that that's a team in rebuild mode and will happily come together. Now, look, they lost arguably their greatest player in the history of Spurs. You'll say Jimmy Greaves, of course, and that's fair enough. But when you lose Harry Kane, and he alluded to this, he said, "Look, I would have fought for Harry Kane if I thought we were on the clock now. But clearly, we were going into rebuild mode. It didn't make sense. It was in the last year of his contract. It made sense to move on. So he's on side with these signings, or so he says. Yeah, it seems a little, to your point, a bit misguided because clearly they're having some challenges right now. You could imagine what they would have had if they could have got one more solid fullback, maybe even the goalkeeper. Vicario's good. I don't think he's elite. He flaps out a bit too much for me, not as dominant as I would like my goalkeepers to be. So there's still areas of the pitch where they're left wanting from a defensive perspective, Ayub. And if opposition teams are not respecting what you bring defensively, I keep saying that's half the battle. Ipswich are coming to Spurs and thinking, keep it tight, we'll get something. Fulham are coming to Spurs Stadium thinking, keep it tight, we'll get something. Half the battle's in the mind, and you've got to force these teams to respect you. And right now, teams are thinking Spurs are good in terms of home or away for us to get something out of them. So yeah, a lot of issues to address. Mid-table right now, they've lost 6 games already of 14. A Europe, 15 points adrift of Liverpool. It's a long. I mean, of course, they're not in the title race by any stretch. On their day, they can beat anyone, but it would appear that on their day, unfortunately, they can lose to anyone as well. So things to address, and I think if they have a so-so season, Ayub, I could see how there could be some noise around his position, but I wouldn't want that to be the case. I think you do have to like sometimes bed in and give things a chance for the long term and hope he comes through, which you would be hopeful he would.
Not in this day and age. He's had 1 year to settle in, and you know football now. It's a here and now. You need the results, and that's why again we've just talked about signing youth. For Ange, he wants results now. He doesn't want results. He doesn't want a successor to reap the benefits of the transfer policy of buying sort of youth now. But it's I don't know. I think if they have a few more bad results, because the noise coming out of the Spurs fans, it's always a. I think chairmans and owners always get a little bit rattled when fans start getting on the backs of
Yeah,
managers,
yeah,
and I think sometimes they I won't sort of say Daniel Levy is trigger happy, but there's a temptation to appease the fans, and sometimes getting rid of the manager is perhaps the easiest way, or at least the simplest solution at the time. But uh,
yeah. I think I still think we're a little way away from that. I do agree with your premise, though. I agree with your premise when it comes to Daniel Levy. He doesn't need a second invitation to fire a manager. We saw that with Jose Mourinho being fired just before the League Cup final, which was clearly a move done in terms of clearly something personal there as well. You know, it just doesn't make sense to do that. You can wait a week and maybe they lose in the cup final. You clearly don't want Mourinho to win
mm,
that cup final because it would have made firing him all the more difficult. So he's in that sense quite a selfish individual, which is fine, but it was a selfish decision. Clearly, I don't think it was in the best interests for Spurs, or at least not in terms of winning that trophy, because I don't think that's the ideal preparation, regardless of what you might think about the manager. Yeah, you can wait a week. Let's just give it a go for this cup final. So yeah, look, I agree with you. If the Spurs fans call for it loud enough, I don't think Levy's going to, or he hasn't shown the propensity to simply
mm.
back the manager and say, no, he's our guy. But I hope he is because, again, I don't think you can keep chopping and changing. I think it does matter in terms of how you communicate, how you engage. Conte, I mean, he didn't really give you much. He was quite antagonistic. Mourinho, we know how his career's gone in the last 4 or 5 years. I think Postecoglou speaks well, connects with the fans. They do put on some great performances. There's some areas that they need to improve on, and I think you can see that clearly. But of course, I don't think there's any reason whatsoever to even consider his position, perhaps until deep into next year. I mean, 2.5 years, 3 years would be an appropriate time to say, look, are we getting to where we need to get to? So, no, I don't see it myself. I think it'd be quite unfair actually.
Well, hopefully we'll have Moggy on Monday, and we'll get the thoughts of a Spuds fan uh, to see what his position is on Ange. And whether he's doing an okay job and whether he deserves the rest of the season. But ultimately, it's a results business. If the results don't go their way, uh, in this day and age, managers don't stick around that long.
Yeah, fair.
Right, okay, that's Spuds. We had a packed week, sort of week of football. Some good results. Your Arsenal, uh, excellent result. Chelsea, excellent result. So talk about the Arsenal and set pieces. It seems to be the flavour of the week.
Yeah, I mean, look, there was a lot of chatter, wasn't there, Yub, after the midweek game against Man United, a game which Arsenal played. They were in third gear. Give Manchester United credit. I think United worked hard to prevent Arsenal from getting success, especially on the right hand side. So I think Man United definitely deserve credit. But there's two sides to every coin, isn't there, Ayub? And that's the challenge that United are going to have when they approach teams like this. And I think it's fine. He's trying to force good habits, Ruben Amorim, that is, like make themselves hard to beat. And in the first half, there was not much in it
Mm.
really between the two teams. But I always say that if you're gonna focus so much on being defensively sound, doubling up, rolling the second central midfielder towards the wingers, there's a price to pay, which is that you look quite anemic going forward yourself, and that was the price that United paid. They didn't look great. They had some moments in the second half, and then when Arsenal turned it on in the second half in terms of going up a few gears, forced a few set pieces, and obviously got the goal. There's been a lot of chatter just focusing on the set pieces. You have 22 goals scored from set pieces since the start of last season, seven more than any other team in that time span. There were some wonderful stories and coming out narratives, and I just want you to, if you don't mind, just give me a little bit of time. There was some discussion about how you've seen in recent times, especially some of the goals against West Ham, for example, where uh, you saw, for example, like just before the goal, I think where Gabriel scored, if you remember, you when he got to the near post, just before the corner, Saka, Odegaard, Gabriel have a bit of a conflab. Saka then rolls over to the corner flag. Obviously, all the players congregate on the back post. There's a lot of discussion between Gabriel and Saliba, Saliba with Havertz, Havertz with Partey. So, I think it was Partey. No, Partey might have been missing that day, but there was a lot of discussion between players. And what's I guess great about Arsenal is it's not previously set pieces were seen as like this accusation, like as if the goals are lesser in some ways. So that because teams couldn't play great open play football, they'd try and play for set pieces against Stoke at this level that they maybe previously Bolton and what have you. Again, just being very fair and open. But what's amazing about Arsenal is obviously they can play the other stuff as well. Of course they can. But yet there's something so incredibly deliberate about how they go about trying to score from set pieces, where previously in recent times, corners have always been seen as a percentage play. It's been a case of get the ball into the right areas and we'll attack it and see what happens. There's such a deliberate nature about their set pieces, similar to the NFL in terms of scripted plays and everybody be understanding where to go, where's the ball going to go, what's going to happen in the second phase. That there is incredible virtue, and I think, in my opinion, a lot to be praised on, to be fair, because I think you'll start to see a lot of teams thinking, right, okay, how do we go about creating what is a percentage situation into a more have the statistics lean towards our favor, which is pay a bit more attention on the training ground, work some clear cut routines. What's amazing about Arsenal is you can see the set pieces geared towards getting Gabriel free. So it's everyone's on the same hymn sheet in terms of right, Gabriel's gonna go here. We all have a certain job to do. And yes, some argue that there's some blocking and there's some interfering going on. I would agree with that. Nothing that I've seen that escalates to the point of a foul. Remember, that area, that real estate doesn't belong to anyone, in my opinion. You've got to be strong. I mean, imagine this was Arsenal in the bygone era, conceding all these goals. We know what's been leveled at them. They're too soft. You need to grow up. This is a game of football. So the fact that it's something so deliberate in its precision, in its coordination, in its choreography, that I just think it's something to be praised, and I think you'll start to see a lot of copycat because this is a copycat league. You'll see a lot of that going on with other teams. Arteta spoke about it when he actually joined about how we want to dominate in every aspect of the pitch, whether it's set pieces, high pressing, open play situations. They've obviously got the set piece coach who actually came from Man City, but Arteta was the one who recommended him when he came to Man City. Arsenal's previous set piece coach, I think, left for Malmo, so he then poached this guy from Man City. And look, I think there is some, let's call it, um, when the camera pans to the set piece coach Nicholas Jova, there's always those who say, well, he seems to be getting his shine. But the truth is, he probably deserves it because
Yeah.
they look so potent. And what's amazing was one of the questions asked to Arteta after the United game was, is it deliberate? And this is what I love about football, the storylines. Is it deliberate the way Arsenal are actually taking their time over set pieces? So what's happening is Arsenal are winning set pieces, that's getting the crowd really involved. You can remember early on this season when the crowd absolutely cheered when I think it was Saka won the corner for the Gabriel header against Spurs. So there's this kind of anticipation that starts to arise, especially at home because it's a cacophony of noise. So this kind of creation of theatre, this noise, this drama, the crowd's into it. The crowd thinks, oh, you know what's coming. Previously, when Stoke used to get throw-ins from close in, if you remember, and then he was asked that, is it deliberate how Saka even takes his time taking the corner, as if to kind of lengthen that level of anxiety for the opposition? So all these storylines are coming off the back of it, which I find fascinating and kind of interesting. I mean, Arteta deadpan said, no, it's not deliberate. It's just perhaps the way doing it. But again, what's also fascinating is if you look at, for example, the Saka corner against Gabriel against West Ham for the Gabriel goal, Ayub. Think about years gone by, set pieces, Ayub, all the players would actually react to the person kicking the ball, taking his run up. So what would happen is Saka would start his run up, and then all the other players would start organizing their movements. What Arsenal are doing is so deliberate, it's the other way around. So if you watch the goal against West Ham, it's when the players start doing their coordinated runs and then Gabriel starts making a beeline for the near post, is when Saka thinks, right, I've got to start getting on my run up and in the cross. So these little subtle differences where it's so deliberate, it's so geared towards freeing up one man, which clearly on the whole, on an average basis, teams are struggling against. I think it's something to be applauded because it shows a lot of nous and a lot of tactical awareness on the training ground. So look, they deserve it. I mean, all their set pieces on Wednesday seemed to cause United all sorts of trouble. It could have been 5-0 just on the corner situations that arose. Again, United had some moments, Ayub, but I thought Arsenal in the end were worthy of their win, to be fair. But yeah, they're on a little good run. They'll be hoping to follow that up against Fulham. But on the set pieces, I think it is something to be applauded. And I think over time, you'll start to see teams starting to, on an offensive basis, pay a lot of attention as to how they can also take advantage. Because clearly, it's a very potent weapon.
Excellent point. I'm surprised clubs have not done that. I mean, there are some clubs who obviously rely on set plays because, in a sense, that's where perhaps their strength is. But it always surprises me because that's the one element where you have complete control. Because corners are always going to be taken from the same place. So, in a sense, you can all these coaches who are set player coaches it in theory it's easier for them to work on that because they know exactly right that's where you're going to take the corner from, so you can work out all sorts of different set plays and that's why I'm surprised. I mean, I'm sure every club works on this, but Arsenal seem to have taken it to the next level. Now what Arsenal are blessed with is a physicality. I think Arsenal always look a very powerful side, and that always helps. I think it's the one element that I think you must have. I mean, there's no point having you're not going to be threatening if you've got 5'5" guys. So I think Arsenal seem to have a lot of 6 foot plus all across. I mean, the back line, the middle, and obviously up top when Havertz is playing as well. So there's a physicality, there's a presence, but that on its own, I think helps. But certainly, I think the set play coach is doing a wonderful job because I must confess that every time Arsenal have a set play, you almost sort of think that there's going to be a goal, there's going to be some sort of drama, some sort of action, and why not? Why not? Because It's all about scoring goals. Doesn't matter how you score goals. Set plays to me is probably one where you can control it. At least you've got an ability or your opportunity to work on that much more than open play. Open play, in a sense, is is spontaneous. You can obviously try and replicate certain situations, but to me, absolute kudos to Arsenal, and I think. They've got the attributes, the assets, the physicality, and what they're doing is absolutely maximizing that.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you wholeheartedly. Got three kind of quick points. I mean, Declan Rice spoke about it after the game. He said, "Look, we stick with our process. We don't just see the corner situations as a point of, oh, grab a breather. Let's just put it in the box and chill." I think chill was the word that you used. So it feeds itself, doesn't it, Ayub? The more success you have in certain situations, the more you're going to feed off it. The more the crowd's going to feed off it, especially in the home games. So now I do think Saka, Martinelli, or if it's Trossard on that side, I do think play for set pieces. I really do. I think they're thinking normally you're looking for a cross situation where you're trying to evade the near post defender. Often I think they sometimes think, heck, I'll just play it off him and get a corner situation because that is also a pretty decent percentage situation, at least in terms of getting an effort on goal. Of course, you're never going to have a crazy high statistical record. It's just too many bodies. I would argue their success rate is quite alarming in terms of its potency. So there is that, but I agree with you. I just think it's the point you made about the height is an interesting one. In previous times when Arsenal have been bullied, more on the defensive side of things, they've had short defenders, whether it's a Mustafi, whether it's a Vermaelen, and others, just to name a few. They've had short defenders. Arsenal always used to be accused of being technical, didn't quite like it up them, as they would say. Now Arsenal are imposing that physicality on others, and I think there is some semblance of teams. I'm not saying being afraid, of course not, but understanding that actually we might not be able to quite compete with them from a physicality perspective. You saw United; they were trying to deal with it in some way, but they had very little success with it. There were so many situations this time, give Arsenal credit. Gabriel's missing. Yet for that second one, you could tell they're all playing for Partey to get free on the far post. He heads it into a dangerous area and it goes off Saliba's backside. But that's my point. It's just there's such a deliberate nature from Arsenal set pieces. And obviously they can play the other stuff as well. But they know that as teams give them more and more respect in open play situations, you're always going to get at least 6 to 7 corners a game. And if you can get two, maybe three efforts out on goal from them, especially with the guys that they've got in terms of Gabriel and you mentioned Havertz and even Saliba and Partey and a few others, that they're going to get at least efforts out on goal and Timber now as well chipping in. So yeah, listen, I think it's to be applauded. I think you'll start to see that because you'll start to see teams copying them, and I think that's the ultimate compliment. But look, back on track, a good win. Both of us thought it would be a draw. I did fear how United would approach. I was surprised Amorim made so many changes when I saw that. That he'd left Diallo on the bench, Rashford on the bench. I was thinking, okay. But again, first off, they played well. But again, the flip side to that, Ayub, is they weren't supporting going forward, apart from one or two moments in the second half. But Arsenal back on track. Heading on to one of the other games, Ayub, just want to get your thoughts. Cracking game, St. James's. Probably a fair result. I think in the end, you've had two players at different ends of the park at the peak of their powers. One Isak, who I thought had an incredible game. And then you also had Mo Salah, who's just, I mean, he's an absolute monster right now in terms of his contributions. Nearly delivered another 3 points. What's your thoughts, Ayub, just overall on firstly the game, but also just where that leaves the title race, given that I guess their three nearest rivals all picked up fairly comfortable victories.
There's always drama with Newcastle and Liverpool, isn't it? It goes back 15, 20 years. There's always lots of goal, lots of drama. And this game was no different. I just thought Liverpool were a little flat. I think they looked tired, and there was a number of players who weren't quite at it. So in that respect, a draw is a very good result. But then again, you have to look at the context of the game and how it panned out to be 3-2 up and then to concede a very, very poor goal. Keller, who's been outstanding. I think he is probably, in my opinion, one of the best number twos in terms of goalkeepers in the Premier League. So it's perhaps not fair to be overly critical because he's had some excellent games, but it was very, very poor. But it was on the whole, I think, a good result. But Liverpool weren't at it, and I think this is where maybe Slot now needs to just perhaps think of a season that it's not just 2 or 3 months. It's a long period of time. He needs to make sure players are fresh. They've got some injuries as well, so this is where he's going to be tested. He's been fantastic, but a number of players look leggy, look tired, and it's a challenge when you're playing. The Premier League is competitive, even if you're playing the bottom team. It's competitive, so therefore you've got to make sure your players are at it at all times. They're not in the red zone. I just sort of felt that a number of Liverpool players were. I thought on the whole, Newcastle probably shaded it, but complete uh maybe a reflection of how Liverpool are that they weren't at it, but they still managed to get a result. They probably on another day might have won the game if it weren't for Kelleher's mistake. So it shows where Liverpool are, that Newcastle are a tidy side at home. They've had some really good results at home. So excellent game as an observer, as a fan. But Liverpool were disappointed. But I think if they look at it objectively, I think it's a really good point in terms of where it leaves Liverpool. I still think they're in a dominant position. I mean, they've still got quite a sizable gap. They've got a tough game tomorrow if it goes ahead. Apparently, there's early reports that Storm Dara is going to be blowing up to 90 miles an hour winds around Merseyside. So it's on red alert. So there potentially could be a cancellation. I hope not. But it perhaps just puts a little bit more emphasis on the game tomorrow. Everton had a fantastic result. I say fantastic result. It was against Wolves and Gary O'Neill, so
Hey, calm down,
maybe
calm down.
maybe it's not as fantastic as that. So if the game goes ahead, it just puts a little bit more pressure on because I think the way things are at the moment, you just can't afford to drop any points because you drop points and somebody will just claw their way back into contention. So good result, I think. Looking at the way that Liverpool played, I think Liverpool fans should be, on the whole, satisfied. Disappointed but satisfied.
Yeah, exactly. Listen, you can't win all of the games, and a draw was the fair result, right? Both teams gave plenty. I think Van Dijk, you're right. You mentioned it after the game, talking about how I think he trailed off his sentence when he said there's something just here in terms of how the fans react and how the team reacts to the fans in terms of winning duels, winning challenges. There's just something there. Listen, Newcastle have beaten Arsenal. They've drawn against City. So you are right. At St. James is a difficult place to go. Liverpool have done well there. They got one of their more famous results, I think, with 10 men, wasn't it, Ayub, when they
Mm,
came back with that
amazing, amazing.
Nunez double, which was, yeah, an incredible moment. Um, so, yeah, Newcastle are a good team, especially with Alexander Isak. He was absolutely incredible. There was a bit too much, I thought, made out of the fact that he beat Van Dijk. He didn't really beat Van Dijk. I mean, that was half a chance from the best part of 25 yards. He didn't really turn him inside out, so I don't know why Van Dijk seems to be getting pelters. It's absolutely unfair. But it was a great strike, wasn't it, Ayub?
Mm,
And a strike of a player who thinks he's going to score from there. That's the thing. So he absolutely wallops it. You mentioned about Kelleher. I saw a game earlier this season. I can't recall which one it was. It may have been Bournemouth, but I'm thinking it might have been Chelsea at Anfield, where he let, and I remember it was with first half from recollection, and he let another ball drift over his head in terms of where he thought there was no player coming, and there was a player sliding in at the far post. I remember it was the opposite end of the Cop, but some player came in at the far end, but slid it in, but he didn't go in. It went, hit the side netting, and I just remember not much was made of it. And I just remember thinking, oh, he's got to be careful with those situations where the balls he thinks it's going off. So I just remember it was kind of a point that I noted at the time, and this one wasn't going off. He knew it wasn't going off, but just something, I guess, a little bit of indecision made him pull his arm away. And look, he was still unlucky the ball went in because from that angle, you're thinking the
mm,
best Shaw's going to do, and I think he alluded to afterwards, was get the ball back into the mixer or into the danger area. The fact that from a very tight angle, he's ended up putting in the one spot that he could only put in for a goal to be conceded there is a bit unlucky for the goalkeeper, to be honest. Perfect contact. But again, Newcastle were worthy of a point. It's a tough place to go. I'm with you. I think Liverpool weren't great. I think Van Dijk alluded to it as much, talking about the duels and what have you. And again, Newcastle is a tough place to go. I think if you told Liverpool fans that the week was going to end with a resounding victory against Madrid City and a draw against Newcastle is something you take. You're not
Mm,
winning all your games in the Premier League. I don't even see that it should be seen as any disappointment. Yes, the other three won, but like you said, they go first tomorrow, and if they beat Everton, I think it's a midday game. If they
yeah.
beat Everton, if the game goes ahead, like you mentioned, then it puts a lot of pressure on the others anyway. So you get that first crack at it, don't you? You in terms
Mm,
of putting that pressure on. So yeah, you're not going to win all your games. A point at St James is a point you probably take at the start of the season.
yeah. Just before we finish, I just want to talk about a couple of quick uh, points. Chelsea, second in the table. I did sort of say that
They were back.
people are, yeah,
Yes.
yeah, and I think they are well and truly back. I think uh, write them off at your peril. At the moment, I would sort of say that they're serious contenders for the title, albeit it's going to be a difficult ask. But what's your thoughts? Do you think Chelsea are back? And do you think the new coach has transformed this club into a serious title contending outfit?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, he downplays it, and fine, that's his prerogative. I'm not a huge fan of that, in fairness. Um, it's just my view, my humble view. And he has his reasons, so maybe he knows better than I do. He's closer to the players, he's closer to the club, he understands the feeling, let's say, within the club, which we can't from a distance. But I always find it that it smacks of a slightly weak mentality. Now, maybe he's just playing it down because he doesn't want the players to feel pressurized, and maybe he thinks the best way to get the players to perform like they are doing is to keep them free, keep them comfortable. He keeps talking about the fact they're not in a title race. They're not in a title race. The only challenge I have with that is it's a bit snobbish against the rest of us who follow football for many a year, who says, "Well, you're second in the league, so if you're not in the title race, why are the others in the title race?" So, I mean, look, for me, I prefer the other route. Say, look, I believe in my players. We're playing some good stuff. Yes,
Mm,
we've got to take each game as it comes. So you can still downplay a lot of it, the whole each game as it comes nonsense that they trot out, do managers. But he can say that, look, we're probably a little way away in terms of chemistry, cohesion, and we've had a lot of personal changes, but we think we've got the talent. Now he speaks about how he feels Chelsea will be the dominant team in 5 years' time. He spoke about that, but I just think it's sometimes a little not weak mentality, but I just prefer the other approach. It's just a preference. I
mm,
prefer the manager who says, well, listen, we go out there, we can compete. If we play our best stuff, we're competitive, and clearly they are. Look, at the start of the season, I was texting your young lad, talking to him that I just love the way this team's playing. Early doors, I thought they were fun to watch. The worry at that time was, yeah, but are they gonna be as solid enough? Are they gonna be serious when it comes to some of those tough games? And early season, you had some question marks, but they've just gone from strength to strength. No doubt, it's off the back of amazing form of Cole Palmer, who seems to score in every single game, leaves his imprint on the game. Um, Jackson's coming into his own in terms of feeling comfortable as that main striker for Chelsea, and suddenly certain partnerships are forming in on that team. Players that you wouldn't think, but who are starting to come to the fore a little bit. Cucurella, I mean, Jack Stevens, I think that's his at least second red card of the season. We can come on to Russell Martin, and I mean, there's no words. That's all I'm gonna say. There's no words for what
mm.
Southampton are trying to do from playing out from the back. Just very quickly, you might have to if you don't mind. I mean, what is this? I don't understand it. I'm all for being playing the way you want. I swear I am. I really love the idea that you keep playing the way you're going to play it. But this is a bona fide 100% guarantee that you're going to get relegated playing this way. Like, this is a cast
Mm.
iron guarantee. He's literally gifting goals to the opposition. And you know this, if the more it happened against Liverpool, the more Chelsea and many other teams, the more other teams are going to press you in certain ways to force more errors because they don't respect you well enough not to press you. And it's a bona fide way. You're telling me it doesn't play a part in Jack Stevens' red card? Because again, if you're always gifting goals to the opposition, the game's mental. It's between the years. You're going to make some mental errors due to the fact you're losing. You're 1-0 down, 2-0 down consistently. And not only that, how deflating is it to give goals like the ones they're giving away? I mean,
Mm.
I spoke about Jose Sarr against Bournemouth giving away penalty after penalty, it seemed. And you saw his performance against Everton. Some shaky goalkeeping, not coming out for crosses that are right in front of him. I just cannot understand Southampton. They've got good players. Tyler Dibling is going to be in the Premier League next year. We
Mm.
spoke about. They've got some good
Yeah.
players out on that pitch. You can't keep gifting good teams and 2-0 lead. I mean, you can't do it. It's criminal. But anyway, that's me off on a rant. Chelsea, good team, quality team, really well respected. I think now. I thought they were great against Anfield. I thought they lost that game just because of Liverpool's know-how and nous and the fact that Liverpool have got some absolute game winners. Not saying Chelsea don't. Just thought they compete well enough in that game where I thought
Mm,
their time will come. Caicedo's playing incredibly well, getting some other players to the fore. Listen, I think they are well in it. I think they've got enough. They score a hatful. They look like scoring plenty as well. Absolutely. And I think they deserve to be off the back of, again, the manager coming in and changing some things. But they're playing some really good stuff. They're a good watch. That's the other
yeah,
thing I would say. Chelsea haven't, I mean, even in times when they've been a good team and won leagues, it's not always been the case they've been a great watch, but now they're a really good watch as well.
yeah.
So if you thought, if I'm going to catch a game, let me catch the Chelsea game actually, because there'll be some good football and game of the week this weekend, no doubt. Other than maybe the derby in Liverpool is that Chelsea Spurs game. So yeah, listen, I think they're in the title race. I think they're well equipped for sure. And like I said, I prefer if the manager slightly changed this tune because I think it would lift the players as well. But again, he knows best.
I agree with that. Uh, I'm very much same. I think if you should be saying if you think that you are serious about winning the league, you should say so. Why not? There's nothing wrong with that at all. I mean, people can sort of say you're going to add extra pressure. No, no, no. You should have that sort of mindset. Just on Martin, he might be sort of following Vincent Company. Company never changed his style, his philosophy. He got relegated, but he's got a gig at Bayern. Maybe that's what Martin thinks, that he's got an identity, a way of playing. Maybe he's sort of thinking, well, look, there's clubs outside of England who are probably looking at this and thinking, yeah, he doesn't divert from a style of play. He's committed. So maybe he could be a coach that some other clubs might look at and say, well, look, he's not succeeded, but he's got a philosophy. He's very strong about that philosophy. I don't know. Maybe that's what he's doing. Or maybe
Yeah,
that's the only way that he can play.
yeah, but I mean, look, you have to be a bit careful. Bayern Munich, I don't think Company was their first choice. That's the first thing. I think there were some issues there. You're right. Look, Company early on had the same accusations, but I don't think it was as bad as this, Ayub. I'm seeing them. I mean, they're literally gifting goals from the goalkeeper. It's not like it's getting broken down at some level. It's getting played out, and it's getting played out one tackle goal. I'm like,
Mm,
man, you can't keep doing this. The reason is this. It's very simple. Why I say this. I'm all for coaches sticking to a style because I do like. I've always been one of those. You don't need a plan B. Just make plan A better. I am a proponent of this. What I'm saying is the key operative word is make plan A better. And right
mm,
now, if you're playing this kind of style, Ayub, I need to see some improvements as the games go along, or at least some know-how where if one or two situations of when you've played out from the back go wrong, and look, he's lost Aaron Ramsdale. Ramsdale played this style at Arsenal, and he also got caught up, by the way, at Arsenal a few times. It's one of the reasons why Raya's come in at Arsenal. But Ramsdale has played this style. He's not got the level of players in front of him like he once did at Arsenal in terms of being at Southampton. But now that Ramsdale is out injured, he's dabbled with McCarthy. He's now got this other goalkeeper as well. My point is, you've then got to say, okay, what gives my 11 players the best chance of winning? And I think the best chance of winning is getting Tyler Dibbling, ideally, on the ball, on the half turn, 35 yards away from goal, running at people. I think that's their best chance of creating consistent opportunities. Yet, all of a sudden, consistently, they're like, right, guys, we're going to start from 2-0 down. How do we fancy that? No, you're not going to win many situations from there on in. I think it's just, honestly, I think it's ludicrous. It helps your players. It doesn't mean you're giving up on your principle. It just means there are certain situations in games, maybe first 20 minutes, guys, we've had a few wobbles at the back. We're just going to lump it a few times, get up the pitch. How about that? And I just think, again, they're not doing it well enough. I don't see how the players can come in at halftime, at full time, and say, Coach, yeah, what you've given us in terms of instructions, that's going really well out there when they're getting pasted, centre backs getting sent off, so they're putting extra wear and tear on their legs. Again, it's not about getting fired and getting a better job at you. But I mean, this is ludicrous, and I like Russell Martin, but I don't understand why he will not change. I mean, this is ridiculous. I'm sorry.
I agree. I agree. I'm an advocate. I'm not one of these. I mean, Bielsa was. If Plan A isn't working, just try harder or you try better at Plan A. I'm not. I think you have to have Plan B, Plan C. You have to be flexible as a coach, and that's a good coach. And I think Martin at the moment is being found wanting. I admire his obsession with wanting to play in a certain style, but if it's not getting you results, you've got to try something different.
Yeah, and just one last point on that. I know we've deviated away from the topic, but you know this. If you're Southampton and you've got the St. Mary's and the faithful are coming out every single week, the nervousness in that stadium when they're doing this, it doesn't bode well for the players. I don't see how it invigorates the players in terms of giving them that extra man. I listened to the whole podcast. I don't know if you've watched it, Ayub. I would consider watching it. I listened to it for the first hour and a half at work today of Eddie Howe and
No wonder
Simon.
you're not getting your work done.
But Eddie Howe speaks to Simon Jordan up front. It's a fantastic, fantastic listen. All 1.5 hours, I think it was, and he speaks about how when they got relegated at Bournemouth, and he says how the fact that I think it was COVID season or something. I think he mentions it, and he goes, "It was such a sickener for us just because we lost the home faithful." In terms of those games, and he also couldn't say goodbye to them in terms of that season when he
Hmm.
when he left the club. And I just remember thinking, man, you've got the crowd, again, bringing it back to Russell Martin, you've got to keep them on side. And keeping them on side means avoiding these kind of nervous situations which you consistently throw them into. They clearly don't know how to consistently play out from the back. If they don't know, you either improve that in training and bring it out onto the pitch at the appropriate time, but you can't keep bringing it out where the opposition 5 seconds later or 7 seconds later is rolling the ball into an empty net. I don't think that's good for anybody. You, I've watched football for many years. I don't think that works for anyone, fans, coaches, or players. So you say admiration. I think it's tinged with a bit of selfishness, but hey, let's see.
Well, it's obviously whatever it is, it's not working. And just on a final point before we call it a day, a guy that you've got tremendous admiration for. You're a great advocate for this coach, but he could be getting sacked. Gary O'Neill.
Yeah, look,
I said just before you start, I said Bournemouth did one of the most amazing things in terms of getting rid of Gary O'Neill when Iriola was available. I think the case rests. I
no,
think I've
no,
been
no, no,
vindicated. I've been
no.
vindicated
No,
on that.
I thought you
But
were gonna.
Gary O'Neill,
I thought you were gonna say. Firstly, the phrase isn't the case rests, but I thought you were gonna
yeah,
say. I thought you were
what
gonna
is
say,
it?
as you always used to say to me at work, the case rests, my lord. So yeah, 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 exactly. Channeling your inner barrister in yourself. Look, I don't think you can say that because ultimately you can't prove something that was never there. You can't prove that Gary O'Neill wouldn't have taken Bournemouth to the heights. Listen, I'm not taking anything away from Iriola, but again, you can't prove O'Neill couldn't have done something similar. Remember, he saved Bournemouth from relegation, Ayub, at a time when, again, Scott Parker got
Mm.
spanked 9-0 at Anfield. I think it was 9, I think, 7, 9. But he got spanked anyway. He got fired shortly thereafter, was after 4 games. It looked dire. The situation was dire. He kept them up. I don't think it was fair after keeping them up in what was absolutely foregone conclusion that they were going to get relegated. I don't think that was becoming, let's say, of what that club should have done. Listen, they ended up with a great coach. No, no, no shots fired at him. You're right. He's under pressure. The Wolves have sold some of their best players, Neto, just to name one of their critical players, and that would make a difference. I still think they're a good outfit, but they're still, again, they've got a goalkeeper issue right now. I mentioned this last time. I hope he doesn't get fired. I'm not sure anybody else could do better. But let's see. I think they've still got time to dig things out. You're right, though. He's another one who just has to be careful in terms of the way they're playing out from back. Not as bad as Southampton are, but you're right. I think they got booed off at Goodison from the away faithful. And I think even at home, there's a little bit of restlessness about the way they played. So he needs a couple of good wins. They were poor against Bournemouth. And now poor against Everton. So shipping back-to-back games with 4 goals is never great. So you're right. I think he's on the hot seat. I don't disagree with you there. Just because this is about the time, isn't it? You when chairman and owners think if we're going to make a move,
Yeah.
it needs to be now before things get too far beyond us. So I'm with you there. I agree. I just hope he does get time because, truth be told, I do think there's at least 2 teams worse than them in the league, which I think will bear itself out over 38 games. Whether or not they're the third worst team, time will tell.
I've got a feeling that he'll probably be the first casualty. There's rumours that
Eric Ten
my
Hag, let's not forget, and
oh yeah, yeah, of course, yeah, yeah,
I
yeah,
think
yeah, yeah,
I think we've
yeah.
had
I forgot him. I
yeah,
forgot about him already.
Cooper at Leicester with Van Nistelrooy
Oh
coming
yeah,
in.
yeah. Blimey, I'll tell you, I need to keep up then. But apparently, there's rumours that Corberan from West Brom has been lined up already. So watch this space. Maybe it might be breaking news next week. But Time will tell. Time will tell. Right. On that note, on that Gary O'Neill depressing note, I think we'll let you uh, enjoy the weekend. So, OS, as always, a pleasure. I look forward
Likewise.
to hooking up next week as well. So, and to the viewers, have a great weekend. If you're in the Northwest or if you're in England, which I think 95% of the viewers are, stay home. It's going to be blustery. It's going to be wild. Just stay indoors and watch football. All right. So, until the next time, see you soon.